give people just another minute. And Kai, we're going to start with you and the photo behind you. So I'll let you. We were talking just before this. If you want to share the photo behind you, so people have a sense of what they're looking at.
Sure, that's a Ralph Simon piece that I bought in South Africa. He's an artist that was trying to demonstrate the juxtaposition of the beauty and the pain of Africa. So he did an exhibit called Ghosts, which he shot in Rwanda and Burundi with a bunch of during the time of mass genocide, and a bunch of fighters and warriors, and used kind of these beads. And so you'd see AK-47s and soldiers who were kind of wrapped in this traditional African garb, or beads from the region. And so it's a piece that I got. It's a phenomenal exhibit, and he's a fantastic artist. And one of my friends helped kind of put me on to who he was, and took us to the exhibit. And so my mother's from Botswana. I spent many years living my summers in Botswana and on the continent. And so as you know, Ed, I am part of the board of Ingressive and have done a lot of investing on the continent over the last, call it 5 years. Both through the fund and personally, and prior when I was at Catalyst Fund. So just a piece that really stuck with me. And so I put it up, and it's, investing in Africa is difficult, understanding the evolution of what is going to happen on the continent. And I think probably most interestingly, I was there during the Africa Bloomberg Media Summit a few years back. And it actually gave me some really interesting perspective on what's going on with China. And how influential China is on the continent of Africa at the moment, and paving a path forward for the next 20 years and having a real vision about what it means to build a self-sustaining country, somewhat at the expense of the countries on the continent as well. And so just a lot of meaning wrapped up in kind of what this photo means.
Thank you for sharing that. And when you talk about meaning wrapped up, if you could put the camera on what's in his hand, I can't tell if that's, or what's in the hand, I should say.
The hand, that is bullets, AK-47 wrapped in traditional beads.
Yeah.
Shot kind of from overhead, looking down, feet at the bottom.
And the bullets are sadly beautiful in that photo. And so first, welcome to Venture Crush. I know that is not a typical way to start a tech event, but political and social statements are imperative in tech. This morning's Washington Post is reporting that Facebook, Twitter, Google CEOs are back in Congress facing questions on how social media promotes extremism and, importantly, misinformation. And I wanted to say, and I'm saying this as Ed Zimmerman, I've worked at Columbia Business School for more than 16 years. I've worked at Lowenstein, Sandler. I was a summer associate in '91, so about 30 years. But this is my statement. It's not, Columbia or Lowenstein or anyone else. This week we had 10 people shot in Colorado. In 2012, there was a mass murder by gun violence, which killed 26 people, including 20 children between 6 and 7 years old at Sandy Hook. Less than an hour ago, USA Today reported that Asian Americans reported the single biggest increase in serious incidents of online hate and harassment as racist and xenophobic slurs blaming people of Asian descent for COVID have spread over the past year. And that's according to a new survey. And last Tuesday, of course, we saw the fatal shooting of 8 people, including 6 women of Asian and Pacific Islander descent at spas in the Atlanta area. There's a lot of talk about the racism. There's not as much talk about the misogyny, about the entitlement of men with guns to say that women are tempting and therefore they will obliterate them, they will mass murder them, they will perpetrate violence against them. we have a Republican Congress that voted down a Violence Against Women act within the last couple of weeks. We hypersexualize Asian and Pacific Island women in particular. And we have a gun epidemic, and we have a government that refuses to do anything about it. It's a national epidemic. It's a national embarrassment. That's part of our brand. And I do think that we have to be vocal about it. So my heart goes out to so many people who are suffering because they've been impacted. And I didn't want to start this session today without making that statement, which again is my personal statement. I can't speak for other people, but I just think it's important to go on record. So with that, on a happier note, thank you for being here. We're going to talk about all sorts of interesting things today. And I assured our guests that bacterial vaginosis was not going to be the most controversial statement of today. So perhaps we should talk about bacterial vaginosis. And I don't know if any of our guests in particular want to go right there, but I know that my son in middle school had to deliver an oral report in class on it. So it's a topic I've been schooled on for a long time. B,
I
you want to
did not
talk a little bit
realize
about
that
it?
you were this funny, Ed. I didn't realize that you were this funny. Like I think I slept on you a little tiny bit. But first off, thank you for having me here as a representative of Honey Pot, and you know, and I appreciate your original statement because you know, really nothing can be achieved by hate. So I appreciate that. So hi everybody, I'm Beatrice Dixon, co-founder and CEO of the Honey Pot Company. I started Honey Pot because of my own bacterial vaginosis, and that's why we're talking about bacterial vaginosis. But I had it for almost a year, couldn't get rid of it, took all the medicine, did everything you can imagine. My grandmother came in a dream and told me what to do, handed me a piece of paper with a list of ingredients for the formula that would save my vagina. And so that's how I got started with my business. Thank you, Ed, once again.
And Whole Foods and Target, which came first?
Whole Foods came first at a regional level. So, I mean, we were only in like a couple doors of Whole Foods, but it didn't matter because we could say we were in Whole Foods, you know?
And so because today's session is about branding, and we're going to do some quick intros, and then I'm going to do like the normal announcement that I was supposed to have done at, you know, at the start of this thing. I'll do that a little later. But I just want people to think a little bit about some of the way that you represent the brand, because this session is all about branding. And so there's an Instagram post from the Honey Pot. I'm turning old school pieces of paper here. Vaginas have the same pH level as wine. I am a big fan. I mean, I guess of both, but
yeah, you
wine,
are. Because I was gonna say.
But tell us a little bit how we came to understand the symmetry of wine pH and vaginal pH and why it's important.
That was
Stay with me, B. Come on, B.
I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it. So that actually was Desiree Natali, who is our social media director. And she just really nerds out on vagina fun facts and found, you know, that a really beautiful quality of wine typically is going to have a pH around 3.5 to 4.5, and a very quality, healthy vagina, even though all vaginas are quality, is actually has a pH, but one that's like kind of doing what it needs to do, right? It's making the lactic acid, it's making good, it's over, it's over indexing on making good bacteria and all those types of things. Also has a pH of 3.5 to 4.5. So I see that you're very interested in that article, Ed.
I've got other notes for you about this, but look, I think, I mean, one of the issues is that we don't talk about tampons and pads. We don't talk about vaginas. We don't talk about women's health. We don't talk about Black women's health.
It's true.
We don't talk about maternal care
Yes.
as much. And if you were going to pitch venture capital or private equity, and I know we're not going to talk about how much money you've raised, if you were going to go pitch venture capital or private equity, and we were in an industry where half the people that you sat down with to make that pitch, half the people who decided whether you get money were people who were potential customers of your product, it would be a very different slide deck, and it would be a very different conversation, and it would be a very different understanding of the market dynamics. And that factors into brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything factors in the brand. Who you're communicating to factors in the branding, because everything communicates, right? So, and shout out to Mr. Cummings, who taught me that, that when I learned, it's not that you don't know that shit, because it's a very simple statement that everything communicates, but but who your audience is, what you're trying to achieve, what you say, what you don't say, all of those things communicate all the time, so you're absolutely right. It's essential to make sure that you have the right information, specifically in the deck when you're raising capital, because you can't lose them. You have to keep them right there, so you have to have a little bit of what you want to say, but mostly what is going to attract them. And you have to figure out the fine balance between delivering your message fucking perfectly because you need this money, right? And still being able to talk to people so that they can actually wrap their mind around what it is that you're pitching, because who's going to invest in something that they don't understand?
Yeah. And let's pause there. We'll come back to you, and we're going to go to the professor of the internet. And Florian, you are, and I'm going to quote loosely from a 2015 article that I wrote, 2014, in the Wall Street Journal, which discussed you and explained why you're the professor of the internet. But in 2012, I think 2011, you raised an early stage venture fund in Germany. You're the founder of Project A, and you are one of the, which is a venture fund in Germany, and one of the kind of leading internet entrepreneurs and angel investors before you started a venture fund in Germany. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and where you are?
Yeah, sure. I can try to do that. Yeah, actually, I started in 1999, and I think what people need to understand, I mean, Germany is not only behind in vaccinations, but is also quite behind on on the digital tech side. I mean, it has improved greatly. I mean, we are not catching up, but we're at least developing. I think, and what you see now in Germany is quite a diversified ecosystem now of entrepreneurs and angel investors, second-time entrepreneurs. I mean, Germany is actually used to be quite entrepreneurial. After the Second World War, you saw a lot of really cool companies being developed out of Germany. I mean, the car makers, companies like Miele, yeah, and the German Mittelstand, but we kind of lost that, yeah, now we're kind of struggling again to we see what's happening in Silicon Valley, we see what happens in the US, we see what happens in China, and everybody knows, okay, that's kind of defining the world probably in the future to come. And but I try to contribute to that, and I try to contribute to this development first as entrepreneur. I've always been a marketing operator. I worked for the infamous Sandler brothers for 5 years, yes, that you might have heard of, Rocket Internet, that gave the world things like HelloFresh, which is, I don't know whether that really makes the world a better place, but at least are quite successful digital companies, and then started my own venture fund in
Now, hold on.
2012.
When you say the infamous Sandler brothers, did you work the camera or the photocopy machine? Why are the Sandler brothers infamous?
I mean, especially in the US, I know, and also in Germany, they have quite a bad reputation, which is, I mean, you cannot really, I guess, separate yourself from what you've done. And what has been, I think, the Rocket Internet method has been looking in the US, copying the models and then rolling them out. Which actually has been quite an effective strategy. I mean, which has probably not been the nicest and most innovative and most creative way of approaching entrepreneurship, but which has worked for a certain time. I mean, that's but when you look at what you see today in Europe and also in Germany is actually a lot more original, a lot more B2B, a lot more deep tech. So what you see, and that is, I think, quite a good development, that you see people from the technical universities, which is probably the strongest talent pool that Germany has, going into digital businesses and coming up with some really cool stuff. And I mean, we're not Israel yet, yeah. So unfortunately, so if you look at Israel, I think that's what probably is the best ecosystem when it comes to number of really cool startups. Divided by the number of people living there. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. So we're not there yet, but we're definitely moving in that direction. We're going more into the tech and deeper tech direction. That's what you'll see more and more, I think, coming out of Germany. Yeah.
So I want to ask you one more question about 1999. And before I do that, I'm going to tell people, Luis, thank you for dropping a little bit of your bio and your LinkedIn link in the chat. We would love to have people introducing themselves in the chat. We know that it's so hard to meet people during the pandemic. We really cherish the notion that we are bringing people together from all over the world. I know we have people dialing in from lots of different time zones, which is great. And so please do introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. Drop your LinkedIn link. Feel free to drop your Twitter link in the chat. And it is good. And as someone with ADHD, I love the fact that you can listen to this conversation and ask us questions, and we can look at it and go back and forth. And I'll also be frying up some eggs over here under the screen. So Florian, in 1999, and this is from a podcast, and I know that you do amazing work with podcasts, mostly in German language, which we'll talk about after. You said that in 1999, when you graduated from WHU, which is probably the leading school for entrepreneurship in Germany, in your class of 70 grads, 21 of them founded an internet startup. And that was part of the first wave of internet tech in Germany. And so I've seen firsthand, because I've been doing tech and venture stuff in Berlin in particular, but in Germany for about 11, 12 years, you are that is really the first wave. It is part of almost a WHU mafia of internet entrepreneurs. Is that accurate? Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's accurate. Yeah, I mean, it changed a little bit, but back then it was really this 1-2 schools where people came from that kind of adapted what was happening in the US, or at least trying to interpret what was happening in the US. And I mean, obviously that all died in 2002 to 2004. Yeah, so that was really kind of the dark period for German digital entrepreneurship, but it kind of returned then 2005, 2006. And since 2010, things have really accelerated a lot. And also the people or the schools where people come from have diversified a lot. So WHU, where I came from, is still plays a major role, but you see especially the technical universities, which are probably the strongest academic institutions that Germany has. They are producing a lot more entrepreneurs, especially in the areas I just described, the more technical founders. And that I think makes a lot more sense and is a lot more sustainable, because I think you also have to understand, I mean, Germany for European standards is quite big. I mean, has like 80 million people, but the market, I mean, if you compare it to the whole market or in the US, is still significantly smaller. Yeah. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And yes, people talk about, United States of Europe, but we're still far away from that. If you look in reality, I mean, people don't speak the same language. And as you've just seen with Brexit, it's still, I mean, yes, there's at least a common currency for most European countries that makes things a lot easier. But if you internationalize a B2C business, it's still a lot of work. And so it just makes sense to, as you see with Israeli startups that do mainly B2B, which is easier to internationalize because you have corporate clients and not the consumer. So I think that, is really a problem that has hampered kind of the development here a little bit. As I said, I think it's now on a lot more different, like the development is lying on a lot more different schools, or founders coming from a lot more different schools. And you see also with the influx of, people like Founders Fund or Excel or Index investing in German startups, you just see, or European startups, you see just a lot of development here that's very positive, and a lot of people giving back as angel investors, and professionalizing the whole ecosystem. But it just takes time. And people always say, when are we Silicon Valley? And then I think people forget that it just takes decades to develop an ecosystem like that. I think we've come a pretty long way. And I think the influx of Anglo-Saxon kind of investors in Europe helps a lot. And on the other hand, it's attractive also for Anglo-Saxon investors to invest in Europe, because I think the valuations are not as crazy as they are in the US. Yeah, so that also helps. So I think it's a win-win situation for both sides. I think, yeah.
And sorry, and when you say Anglo-Saxon investors, just because for American ears, that's a very different statement.
Okay.
I believe what
sorry, that's probably not
mean,
precise.
Yeah, for us, that means white people. So.
No, that's not well. I don't care. I don't care whether people are white or whatever.
Yeah, no,
What I wanted to say is people that are investors that are either based in the US or based in the UK. Yeah. And whether they're white or whatever, I don't really care, as long as they are. That's what I meant. Sorry.
No. One of the interesting things about spending time in multiple markets is that you get a sense of where things aren't going to translate. And since I, like so many Americans, am monolingual, I should at least be able to figure out some of the idioms in English. So I'm just making it, but okay. And I appreciate that. And by the way, where did you get your PhD?
I was at Wharton School and University of Aachen, which is a technical university in Germany. Yeah.
And which one had better cheesesteaks, Wharton or? And if you don't know what a cheesesteak is, Florian, now you're really in trouble, because it's a cultural imperative for anyone who went to school in Philly.
Vegetarian cheesesteaks, though.
No, but actually, I liked the food in Philadelphia a lot. But actually, cheesesteak was not my favorite, to be honest. Yeah, I wasn't a vegetarian back then, but still, it's but it's pretty good stuff that you can eat. But I don't know why that became so famous, to be honest. That's a problem with a lot of traditional food, I guess. Also, Germany, people always think it's like Wurst and things like that, which is also not really the stuff we eat every day, to assure you guys.
No, although we could talk. I mean, Germany has many things to commend it. The Riesling, which keeps its pH somewhere in the vaginal level, which is great. But the food is not why you go to Germany. Prove me wrong when I'm there next time. You can take me out to dinner. Okay, so Ulali, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing at KPOR? Stop laughing. Pay attention to Lily. There's nothing funny
Listen,
going on here.
I'm with
Come on.
you. I'm very much with you. So we are investing in early stage, so pre-seed to Series A companies whose goal is to close gaps of access and or opportunity for low-income communities and or communities of color.
And you've moved around the world a bit before coming to KPOR. And I also like numbers. So how many deals have you personally led in venture? And then where were you moving around before KPOR?
Well, so I started in venture in KPOR. Before I came back, I was moving a lot. I think I'm at like 62 because we just closed a deal yesterday.
Awesome.
So like 62 is what I'm going to call it.
Okay. And where are some of the other places that you have?
Oh, well, so South
hung your
Africa,
hat?
shout out to South Africa. I personally have angel investments in Nigeria, Ghana. We worked in Mexico, Colombia, India, Brazil.
Okay. And you also have there's a thread of health markets and health research in your background. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, for me, I started off as, wanting to, grew up, two big things, like have a ongoing chronic illness that I suffer from, grew up in Bayview Hunters Point where every kid I knew had asthma. I was just joking about this the other day. We would like trade inhalers. It's like, oh, I forgot my inhaler. You can use mine. And that's how common asthma was. Have family in Nigeria and just remember getting calls in the middle of the night all the time that some relative had died of something that in the US would have seemed like, doctor's visit and be cured. So went to business school, or not business school, went to undergrad with the idea to become, OBGYN, because a lot of people were dying in childbirth. Even, at that time, I thought it was a third world problem. Now we see it's definitely a US issue as well. Changed paths, much to the chagrin of my dad, who then promptly called all of my Nigerian relatives and said that I was killing him slowly. But my focus remained healthcare, and healthcare, looking at healthcare globally. So global health and the intersection of global health and business. So.
And you did graduate work at a couple of different places, some of it in Tel Aviv and some of it at Duke.
Yeah, no. So when Florian was talking about Israel, like, to me, shout out to Israel. I mean, like, Startup Nation, that book, if you talk about branding, like, I feel like Israel's like, we're going to let people know who don't know about us. Like, listen, know about us. We are the Startup Nation. And so did some coursework around entrepreneurship in Israel, which was awesome. And just, I feel like Israelis are just like, talking about hype, like they are not afraid to hype themselves up. I need to get some of that Israel, like, jazz and get some of that. And then did a year actually too in the UK. But yeah, I mean, I think to your point, so much of, we're global, the world is flat. And so I felt like it's necessary to become a citizen of the world. And even now, I think that, when you talk, you mentioned the women who unfortunately were killed. And I think so often cultures, whether we say Asian, it's just you lump folks together. And it's recognizing where people come from and what that means. Because I remember, studying in the UK, and for them, Asian, included Indian folks. And I was like, for us here, when we say Asian, historically, we did not mean Indian. And so it's just like the importance of language and the importance of context, et cetera. So that's I don't know where I was going with that.
But. Just two quick notes, and then we'll ask Kai to introduce himself properly, not just the art on his wall. One is when you said the world is flat, I understood what you mean we did have, we had Mark Kelly, Space Shuttle Commander, now Senator Mark Kelly, at our Venture Crush events a couple of times in the past. And at one of those, he did tell a couple of great stories about some flat earthers who have gotten in the way of some folks who are astronauts. And 80-year-old Buzz Aldrin ended up popping one, and had it after several years of harassment. I know you didn't mean the world was flat in the physical sense, but you did mention, Israel is great at hype and you are not. And that is part of your personal brand. And the reason that I asked you how many venture deals you led, which is more than 5 dozen, is because the math is beyond dispute. But reputationally, you don't hype yourself. Reputationally, you don't go out there and say, I've got all these degrees, I've studied all over the world, I have expertise in all of this stuff, I've made these amazing investments, KPOR has unbelievable returns. And there's a cultural thing, there's a conscious decision thing. Do you feel like you are not as well known? Because one of the things we're going to talk about is the consistency of a brand and the reach of a brand. And your brand is remarkably consistent, but you've made a decision about the reach by not hyping yourself from the tops of the mountains.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, am I that well known? Probably not. And I think part of me too, Kai, when you were talking, I remember, during the time I've spent in South Africa, one story stuck with me, was like, during apartheid, when people died, they referred to them as like a group. So it's like the Soweto Six, things like that. And so it's like, it's less individuality and who are you in as part of community. And I would like, for me, that's always the brand. And I felt it, I feel like that's also a very Nigerian thing. Like, who are you in relation to your family? Someone put Ubuntu. Yeah. It's like, I am because you are. And so my brand I think is not just me, but it's like, who have I touched? And so when I see, I started our summer associates program, and we've had people who got their start in venture at the program go on to do awesome things. And I feel like a part of me when they succeed is connected there. So it's less important for people to know Ulili and Novak Pori. I think it's more important for people to have access to products because Ulili funded them, or have access to the world of venture because Ulili gave them their first venture job. But I always feel like, my works spoke for themselves, and you didn't need to know who I was. I think the difference now is like, we're raising money. And so people are like, well, I've never heard of you. Like, I was on what probably was like the most horrible call last night. And someone was like, oh, so, Mitch Kapor and Frida Kapor Klein, founder of Kapor Capital. And they're like, oh, so it's great that they chose you, but like no one else basically would ever hire you in a partner role. And I'm just like, wait, this is a real conversation. And, I think that there is, usually I would just black nod politely. I'm like, oh, thank you. Okay. But then I was just like, no, listen. And I had to state my resume to that person to let them know who I was. And, he backpedaled a little bit, but I'm just like, that is what I was getting. And I think we're seeing that more and more in terms of, a lot of people as folks kind of, how do I say it? As more folks, or even people in the Black community, I think, as investing in Black founders or Black GPs become a thing, folks group you together. And so the importance of brand does become a thing, because it then, even though we've been doing this for 10 plus years, or I personally have been doing this for 10 plus years, people are just like, oh, aren't you the same as this other person who just started yesterday? So it's an internal conflict, I would say, because I'm never like a personal promoter, but like maybe I need to be in order to do the work I do.
Well, as a longtime fan, I am happy to be an Ulili promoter, and I think that um, we certainly see one of the issues is that these new kind of diversity buckets of funding put people into a category based on diversity rather than based on the fact that one person has been investing capital for 12 years and another person is new to the field, or one person is investing out of a $200 million fund and someone else is investing out of a $5 or $10 million fund. And we don't do that to white people. And I don't really understand why people think it's acceptable or appropriate. So I appreciate you talking about it, because it's important and we don't talk about it enough. And I had a call last night where that was about 20-30 minutes of the conversation from someone who is experiencing it, who has made dozens and dozens of investments. And so that's a challenge. But the impact that Capor Capital has, that the Capors have, that the people at Capor Capital have, is amazing, and the returns are pretty eye-opening too, which is great. All right, we're going to come back to you and your brand and how we think about branding. And now, Kai, are you in Brooklyn or are you in Manhattan? Where are you today?
Brooklyn today.
All right.
Yeah.
And how long have you been in Brooklyn?
No, 6 years now. 6 years. I mean, I grew up in Newtown, Connecticut. One thing you don't know, Ed, and we didn't talk about this before the call. So my family grew up in Newtown, Connecticut. My brother went to Sandy Hook Elementary School. And then we moved to Bridgeport, Connecticut. And one of the teachers that was killed that day went to school with my brother in elementary school and in high school, and was a teacher there. And so, holds a very, very special place in my heart, knowing, what went on there. And so I appreciate your words earlier, and just wanted to say thank you, because your brand, and we're talking about brand here, and I think one of the most important things about brand is authenticity, and what you have done for the New York tech ecosystem, what you have done for underrepresented fund managers, bringing awareness to these issues, being vocal around politics, around the state of our union, around the state of venture in general, is eye-opening. It's refreshing. And I tell you this all the time, I admire you, I respect you tremendously. And so I thank you for the work that you've put in and you continue to do. And it's not talked about enough. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's talk about who you went to high school with, because we got to steer out of this.
Where do I start from? I mean, how do I follow you, Lily? I mean, this is I guess one of the things I'd like to talk about and how we think about brand, and I spend zero time on social media, literally zero. I mean, you've probably seen this, Ed. Like I struggle to even like posts that you share about me and promote myself in any way. It's like painful, and like I have to hit this fucking heart button. Like I don't want to do this. And so, it's I think a blessing and a curse in many ways, because, I think when I see founders and they come in and I'm able to share my struggles and my story around fundraising in 2006, when there were no funds dedicated to Black folks, when it was still a very difficult ecosystem to navigate. There weren't people posting about their investment thesis. They weren't trying to, bring people in the door. It was like, okay, there's a set of repeat founders who I'm going to invest in, and this circle is super tight, and breaking into it was virtually impossible. And so to see the evolution of the loudest, promoter on social media getting the most attention is something that I think I struggle with as well. And I certainly believe that we need the voice and a guiding light in terms of an overall community, particularly in the Black, Latinx, female, venture ecosystem. But at times, the signal to noise ratio is certainly out of whack. And as somebody who has spent 15 years as an entrepreneur and building credibility in the venture ecosystem for 6 years, and trying to generate great returns, I think I always struggle with what is the right amount of promotion for our brand as a fund at courtside, self-promotion in myself, and being authentic to who I am. And really, I focus investing in a very narrow segment, right? Our fund at courtside invests in sports, we invest in gaming, and we invest in fitness. And those are what have often been areas within the venture ecosystem that are overlooked, ignored, and do not, or have not been perceived to generate, outsized returns in the market, or looked at as very risky categories. And so, when it comes to fundraising, and you're trying to figure out how to tell a story and craft a narrative and bring yourself to the forefront as a thought leader, we take almost an antithetical approach to many of these things, which is, the decision makers in our industries, both publicly traded companies, privately held, startup ecosystem, we spend an exorbitant amount of time trying to earn that credibility and respect within that ecosystem, and can kind of ignore the rest of the venture ecosystem to a large extent, because there's a reason why a founder will come to us for capital, and they know the types of support and network and value that we actually bring to the table. And so I think we've done a very good job of kind of having that reach and that thought leadership within our verticals. But when it comes to fundraising, you get, this is a verticalized approach, and you're a Black GP in this area that we're very concerned about. How are we going to generate returns here? And so I think we spend a lot of time thinking about, how do we improve our brand? How do we post? How do we get in front of the right individuals to make sure that our thought leadership is well regarded and respected, but at the same time, have that authenticity about our brand where that might not be who we are. And so it's always a fine line. I think B said something very interesting before that she glazed over very quickly, but it's really important. What you don't say is as important as what you do say many times. And so, when we had a, surge in reporting and attention around Black Lives Matter, we as a fund do not explicitly focus or have a of diverse and underrepresented, founders as our focus, but 39% of our deals are in underrepresented founders. And so we were like, well, where are we in the ecosystem? Like, nobody's talking about us, right? Like, and the capital is not coming to us in terms of a fund that is looked at as a diversity focus, but we do and excel very well. And so we're going in as a 3X fund to try and raise. Do we go in the door where the same white founders are going and compare ourselves there? Or do we go into the door of where other Black VCs are raising, which is really crowded, and they're probably looking at the brand they've developed and not the returns, right? And so when I see this kind of very difficult situation to navigate, we're like, door A, door B, which one are we going to go through? Where are we more likely to get money? And most oftentimes it's not through the diversity path, right? And so it brings a lot of, underlying, questions around how we present our brand and who we are. And we're still, wrestling with that and the best way to present ourselves to the larger, venture ecosystem.
So 3 of you are currently fundraising, which wasn't necessarily planned, but it's definitely very 2021. How do you think about the positioning that Kai just talked about? How do you think about raising money based on your brand versus raising money based on your metrics, and which doors you enter? And I'm gonna throw this out to the 3 VCs, and then we're gonna come back to B, although B, I'm happy to have you be part of this too, because you've had some interesting experiences on this front.
Yeah, no, I think that with what Kai said 100% resonated. I mean, I think that just to say, we don't only invest in underrepresented people of color, but 60% of our portfolio are women and underrepresented people of color. And that's by nature and intentional because we reach out to those markets and support those entrepreneurs, et cetera. I feel like regardless of who you are, I mean, we've had calls with people not knowing that they had a diversity fund, and they put us in that bucket anyway. My favorite was when someone, I think she meant to say like, we're out of, our Black allocation is done. She was like, oh, we don't have any more Black money. And I was like, Black money? I was like, I'll take the green money. So I just joked it off and I was like, I'll take green money. And she was like, oh, no, I mean, like, we're already allocated our dollars for, Black GPs. And it was like, okay, well, what about this other fund? Like, just because we're Black, we don't have to go in this Black category. I thought because, through Cape Horse Family Office, we have LP positions, and ditto to everything Kai said about you, Ed. I mean, I think you have been doing the work on the DL, and I'm happy that you're now, shining a light, because I think it's important for people to hear, and hopefully folks also are moved to action, because not just because they feel guilty, but because it's a great financial decision. But I feel like too often Black fund managers are kind of grouped together. We're investors in a bunch, and like, Marlon at Mac Ventures does something totally different than we do. But by nature of us both, having almost the same skin color, they're going to group us together. So we go in with, leading with our returns, leading with the brand that we've built. I think when you get there, the people who know you and know your works will dig in there. The people who don't will show their lack of education and just be like, oh, so what, this is your first time raising, or this is your first time investing. Have you done it? And it was like, did you read the deck? 178 companies we've invested in. So yeah, I mean, I think it's, you go in with we go in hoping to lead with our impact, helping to lead with our financial impact. But yeah, people have blinders on, and sometimes they can't see past the skin color, which is sad.
Yeah, truly. And Florian, you got, I mean, it's obviously different, but people don't think of Germany as the primary market for venture capital.
That's
and
true.
and you have to educate some folks, and so
Yeah.
people don't necessarily know unless you tell them that in a deal like Spryker, where you invested from pre-seed to Series C and are sitting at I don't know, probably roughly a 40 times markup in your fund. I'm sure I'm not supposed to disclose that, but I did. That's why you want to invest in someone, and that's a markup on aggregate dollars, not just the pre-seed dollars. Do you find that LPs outside of Germany or outside of Europe, or LPs that don't typically invest in German funds, have any sense of what you've accomplished?
I mean, to be fair, I mean, we're now around for 10 years, yeah, and we have like our third fund, and now things are increasingly easy. The first fund we raised from a rich German family, or basically two rich German corporates, and if they wouldn't have given us, and I had done, I think, 60 angel deals before that, yeah. So I had an angel track record starting in 2005, and I had my first exit. The first fund I raised was basically on a 6-year angel track record, but we only got it from like, rich German families, which there are lots of, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of very rich German families that you can convince, and that's basically a bet on you personally. And I would say now, after 7-8 years, it really started to shift, that we started to talk to institutional investors, and they not only listened to us and were nice, but we're also starting to write the first checks. And I can also understand it from like the institutional investor side, because I mean, they're not paid for taking risks, to be honest. Yeah. So if they invest in a German GP, which I was, okay, yeah, I see the returns. And our first fund is now at like a 4.5, it's an 80 million euro fund, so roughly $100 million. We roughly stand at a 4.5x. Yeah, so it's not a bad fund, yeah, for a first fund. And we now have 6 unicorns out of 60 companies we invested in. So they're evenly distributed across funds, so that's also good. Yeah, but that's not because we're so genius. That's just luck. But anyway, but what you really see is things became a lot easier when you had the first 2 US institutionals investing in us. Yeah, so Hamilton Lane in that case and Top Tier Capital. They knew us because they were investors in some of the leading European funds, which are based in London, Excel, the London office, and Index. We had 5 or 6 co-investments with Excel and with Index. And that's why they started to say, okay, who are these guys from Germany investing on a regular basis with people that we know? And that kind of built the trust. And it's not great, obviously, but I can partially understand it. Yeah, so that they are basically saying, if I'm an institutional money manager, I'm not paid for taking risks or making statements. I want to be sure who these guys are. And they started talking to us like 5 years ago. And in the last fund, which we closed 2 years ago, they started to writing the first checks. And I think if we want it now, like after 12 years, if we raise our next fund next year, then we might have predominantly institutional money. Yeah, that's that. And that's, I started to accept it, yeah, because, but also to be honest, because we had the chance to raise money from German corporates and from German kind of rich individuals, that made it possible for us to build this track record. Yeah. So that's why it wasn't a frustrating experience, to be honest. Yeah, because we had an alternative source of money. But I mean, now our last fund was 200 million euros, so $250 million. If we want to go bigger, we need the institutionals. Yeah. So, but it's right on time for us when we outgrow the individuals in Germany, that we have the track record that we actually get institutional money. And the guys are herd kind of players. Yeah. So once you see Hamilton Lane coming in, Top Tier coming in, 2-3 institutionals coming in, we're talking to Ontario Teachers Fund right now. So, and once these people start to invest, others follow. Yeah. Sorry.
It's a great point, because there's an extent to which vouching plays a really important role in building your brand. And I'm going to come to you in a minute, because you've got Whole Foods and Target vouching for your brand. That lifted you up. And for the founders of startups who are listening and with us today, they're thinking about what vouches for my brand. And you see the vouching in every deck, because it could be an advisor, it could be where you went to school, it could be the company you used to work at, regardless of what you did there. And there are obviously systemic impediments to the vouching, which we've been talking about. But Accel and Index are vouching for Florian's early fund. Then those 2 LPs who saw that vouching were convinced that that was good enough. And now those 2 LPs are vouching as to others, and people follow. So how big a breakthrough what was that? How important has vouching been for Honeypot?
Well, for Honeypot and for any brand that wants to be in consumer packaged goods, what you're doing in the market is what tells a retailer, which most retailers are not. Most retailers don't want to be the first one, right? Because the shelf has so much meaning, it has so much value. I mean, it's literally like a little section of a shelf could be worth millions, it could be worth billions, it could be worth a lot of money. So, when you get into the game that I'm in, which is, like I said, the consumer packaged goods space, what you did the year prior sets you up for how you want to do in the years coming, right? Like if we wouldn't have been in Walmart and on Amazon and doing, and having our own website and doing all those things, really that data and those numbers is really what was vouching for us, right? If we weren't able to make any money in the time period that, prior to us getting into Target, which was really the thing that really lifted our business up, right? If we weren't able to do that, just like now, if we weren't able to do really well in Target, then we wouldn't be in a position that we're in now, where we've got 22 products that are going to be on the shelf at Walmart, right? So all those things everything is about vouching in this game, when you're raising money and you have been able to show for the last money that you raised, because that's what this shit is all about, right? Like you raise $1 million, you raise 10 million, you raise 5, whatever you raise, that $1 million that you raise, that needs to turn into like $5 million or more, right? If you raise 10 or 20, that shit needs to turn, that has to turn into money. So the whole game of all of this is about vouching, and it's about what you did prior to when you got to wherever you are, because that's going to set you up for because that is working for you. That is your example of what you bring to the table. And whether it's raising money, talking to a retailer, which is a version of raising money, whatever it is, your track record speaks for itself. So
can I say, like, I saw the Target commercial, and that I like looked you up and I was like, next time I'm in Target, and that got it for me. And I think just, you selling a natural product, and you had your hair was beautiful, it was natural. I was like, okay, you're very much your brand. And the product is amazing. So I will, as a consumer, I haven't tested my pH, but I will see. I'm very interested now. And so I just, like that brand, like there was just joy in your face in the Target commercial that I was like, oh, whatever she's selling, I would like to try to get some of that joy that you exuded.
Thank you.
And when we talk about the Target commercial, and that was not a plant, when we talk about the Target commercial, you want to tell us what happened with the Target commercial? Because you also, that was a moment for the company.
Yeah, that was a big moment for the company. Because of that moment is, why a lot of other moments have happened, right? Like even that moment was vouching for Honey Pot, right? Which to some people, that shit doesn't even make any sense. But that moment, basically what happened is we did a commercial with Target, and one of the questions that Target asked was what was really important to me about the work that we're doing with Honey Pot. And I said, what was important to me was that Honey Pot can be an example, to the venture capital private equity community that, that just because our skin is a certain color, right, we're still just fucking human beings making a living, right? So that a woman and a Black woman can raise money and can make really good with it, right? And then that, more importantly, for other young Black women or Black women that are coming up with us, behind us, before us, however, because this is how we're going to keep money in the venture capital private equity world allocated for us, is we have to make good with these things, right? And I want Honey Pot to be the comp for the next girl who's raising capital for her consumer packaged good brand, right? And so some people had some pretty terrible things to say about what I had to say. And they created a trust pilot, and they gave us like 1.5 stars. And 98% of those people that put that trust pilot up probably had never even heard of our brand or tried our products. And it went viral in a very big way, which is why I'm incredibly grateful to all those people that created the trust pilot and had those terrible racist things to say. Some of them were actually quite funny. But yeah, I mean, but it really catapulted our business to a place that I just don't even know if it would have happened. Right. So it was dope. Actually, it was the best experience that ever could have happened to me as a founder. And it was the best thing that could have ever happened to our business, because literally within days, we were on the reel. We got on Dr. Oz. I mean, every news station, every press thing that was coming out was about honeypot, honeypot, honeypot. And so it really garnered like millions and millions and millions of views. And you know, and it brought a lot of attention and love and kindness to our brand.
So I dropped a link in the chat if people want to check out. There's a good, really good article in Essence on it. But Target decides that Bee's product is doing really well in Target, and they do a spot for Black History Month on Founders We Believe In, and they script it and they film it, and Bee does her thing. It's a short spot. It's lovely. And Target then puts it, it's a Target commercial.
Yeah.
And because Bee says that she wants the next Black girl to see this and to know that this is what she can do too. And Bee happens to be one of the first 40 Black women in America to have raised more than $1 million of venture, which is a terrible stat and a wonderful stat at the same time. And because she said it's for the next Black girl who's thinking about doing this, there were a lot of racist responses, and they went to various sites to trash the company. The reaction to that, were you talking to Target about the reaction? Because the Army was motivated. They came out in force to support you. As a result of that, was Target supportive? What did Target do, and how did you think about playing that? Because you didn't know which way it was going to go in real time, right? How do you think about protecting yourself?
How do I think about protecting myself, you said?
Yourself and your brand in that moment, because you had to do both.
I mean, in that moment, and there's certain moments where there's just shit you can't say, right? You can't try to defend something that you have no control over, right? And so what I felt to do was just stand by what I said, because I meant what I said. And if you asked me 1,000,000 times, I would say it again, right? But Target absolutely stood by us. They were the ones that chose the content for the commercial, because we shot that commercial over like 3 days, right? And in that particular scene, I was sitting down for nearly an hour, and they were just feeding me questions. And so they chose that content. So they knew what was going to happen, right? But the beautiful thing is they were prepared for it, you know, and they knew how to handle it on their side, and they knew how to coach us on how to handle it. And through everything, Target has been enormously supportive. When we went viral and weren't prepared for that, couldn't ship certain products because we just didn't have it. When the pandemic happened, you know, and you know, everybody was having issues with their supply chain. They were cool. It was just like, just communicate with us and tell us what's going on, right? So Target has been enormously supportive. The humans that buy our products, even if they didn't buy them and just had wonderful things to say, were enormously supportive. And actually, all those people that created that trust pilot and had those racist things to say were actually quite supportive as well. So for me, I understood all of those things that were happening. And so it just felt natural to just be there and stand by what I said, because I meant that shit. And also, you know, I can't tell somebody what opinion to have about what I have to say. They are entitled to their opinion. They are entitled to their belief system. They are entitled to think however they want to think, just as much as I am. And I you know, so I just, it felt easier for me to lean into that because I just don't have any control over the other side of that. So it just felt easier for me to be authentic in that, and also to back up what I said. When you're defensive, it's because you think that the thing that you're defending, or what's coming at you, typically when you're defending yourself, you don't really necessarily, in that type of scenario, you almost believe what the other side is saying, right? And I, not for a fucking millisecond, believed in what they were saying. I didn't say what I said because I was racist. I said what I said because they asked me a question, and that was my answer, right? So I'm just grateful for the opportunity, and grateful for Target for choosing us to be a part of that, and grateful to those people that had all the things to say that they had to say.
And all right, so for the VCs, that's an amazing founder. That's a founder that when the shit is hitting the fan, you line up behind, you quit your job and you go work for that person. Or if you've quit your job and there's a problem, you're like, that's why I'm here. That's who I'm working for. That's someone I can believe in. You don't always get to see someone tested in that way, and the market doesn't react, and you don't always have a partner like Target. And by the way, like, I don't know Target from a hole in the wall, but amazing. Although actually I do know Target because my wife went into labor in Target for our first child in 1999, and I almost fainted. So how do you evaluate a founder? What signs do you see where a founder has to make really tough, really fast calls on protecting the brand, the company themselves?
I'm happy to go. I mean, for us, we call it, one of the things we're looking for is what is that person's distance traveled story. So it's like, what challenges did they have to overcome to get to where they are now? I'm sure Bee in her life has dealt with other situations, although, maybe not with thousands of people attacking her. And I was I left my good review on Amazon because I saw that. But that is part of the no worries. That's part of the evaluation process. I mean, I think that where others in Sand Hill Road are looking for kind of that pedigree in Stanford and Harvard, et cetera. For us, it's like, tell us your story. What brought you to this point? Because it's that resiliency that folks have had in their life that will help them get through those difficult times. And I like, as they say, it's like she let her haters be her motivators. And we see that all the time. It's like, have you had situations like that in your life?
I would argue it's probably a little different. I know it's not comparable to being discriminated against, but I really like to invest in people because they show this level of resilience or resiliency if they've been athletes. Yeah, because I think athletes also, I mean, even though nobody attacked them, yeah, but it's if you have done sports in a serious way, no matter what sport it is, I think it shows that you can really go through certain situations that are not pleasant, because I think every athlete has been through being injured or had to go through losses and a coach that hasn't been the greatest person and the most supportive person, but rather an asshole. So and still had to go through this, and I think that's why if people have been athletes that are professional or at least very serious about what they did, I like that. And I also like if people are not coming from, rich kid type of background, which obviously also happens in Germany and has been to the great. But if people had to, arrive at certain positions in their life by themselves, yeah, and they can actually show how they've done something themselves, yeah. So I think that is something you can find out about a person in a credible way. Also, if you just meet them for a couple of meetings or just see them right now through Zoom calls because you don't meet them. I think that's always a pretty good proxy for how people will behave when things are getting not so nice, which is happening in every startup, I guess, yeah, no matter where it is.
Yeah. Kai, can you talk about how a founder has presented their story or their brand, their personal brand or their company's brand in a way that convinced you that they had what it took, given what Lily and Florian just articulated? Or,
Yeah, I
if your
mean,
test is completely different,
no, I think it's interesting. My first company, I put myself $20,000 in debt. I had to hop a turnstile to try to make a VC meeting because I couldn't afford at the time, a $175 Metro card to make the meeting. I literally went to the Second Avenue F train stop and was like, credit card, nope, credit card, no, credit card, nope. Guess I have to hop the turnstile. And then I got stopped by the police and I didn't make that meeting. It was with Ian at Graycroft. I had to cancel. It was like one of the most embarrassing moments that I had. And so, the I decided to start another company. And it was completely irrational. Like I was just like suffering. It's the worst. Like starting a company is arguably the worst thing you can do, right? Like you're only doing it because you have an irrational belief that you can spend every waking minute of your life dedicated to something that you care enough about to be fulfilling. And so I think, to Florian's point, you see that in athletes, right? It's irrational to think you're going to become a professional athlete. You see this in artists, right? Where like making a career as a musician. So, we look for the typical resilience, like where did you come from? How did you get here? What hurdles did you have to, push through? But I think there's something around understanding of someone's craft. Like I always ask people, like, what do you do outside of this? Like, what is the thing that you dedicate all your time to? Because inevitably being a good CEO is very similar to being an athlete, which is you have coaches, you have mentors, you're training, you're continuously pushing yourself to get better at every turn. And when you think about someone who plays an instrument or you think about somebody who plays a sport, it takes dozens of years to become good at it. Like you don't pick it up. Maybe you are. Sometimes people are gifted. The number of people who are gifted is this much out of everyone else is very talented and they work really hard. Only a few people I've met, are truly, truly, truly gifted at something. And it's rare when you find that individual. And so, just to round out the conversation, I think we tried to identify what it is about that founder that gives them some unique advantage as they are looking to continue to hone that craft and can push through adversity, because there are a lot of those people who are talented and will do that, but they have to have something about them that you think gives them an unfair advantage. We made an investment in a company called Every Mother. It is a women's health business that focuses on post-pregnancy, specifically with evidence-based solutions around diastasis recti. And it's, again, a conversation similar probably to what B has. Like you walk into a room, you probably get a lot of people who are like, what is this? Like if you're not actually having it happen to you, you don't know how many people suffer from it. And, when I met Ali and we met Leah, it's not a business. It's not about making money, right? It's not about like the profit, and it's there. Like clearly they're doing well. The ARR speaks for itself, their unit economics, but she wasn't a repeat founder, right? She came out of business school, like had a great education. Like they're not some of the signals that you would look for, right? As traditional, like, oh, like you had the hard life to get here, right? But the passion and dedication to the problem they were trying to solve was personal. It was something that trumped all other issues that they were facing and that they have come up with a solution for. And so there's always this fine line of what is someone's core competency and how well do you think that they can apply that to outperform? And it's a hard equation because you can solve a math problem 10 different ways and every single solution comes out to the same thing. And so when you're going through this equation in your mind as a VC and you're like, okay, how do I get to a yes? There's a million things that can get you to a no. Getting to a no is really easy. Getting to a yes is very hard, specifically when you have to get partners to buy in, because you have to become as committed to that business as the founder is, because you're essentially going to become one of the largest partners, shareholders, and individuals on that journey. So it's very difficult, I think, particularly in a Zoom world where, sometimes you'll sit down with somebody at a dinner and they'll treat, the wait staff like shit. And you're like, you're not a good person. Like, you're just a bad human being. Like, I don't want to be on your board. You don't get that, right? It's very easy to gloss over the personal characteristics that may lead you to treating your customer service team or your support staff or the lower level employees in your company like shit, where you're not going to build a good corporate culture, right? And those little nuances of how someone interacts in a non-formal pitch session is what gives you the ability to kind of read between the lines on if you want to be on that board or not. And so the biggest challenge for me during all of this has been the ease at which someone can gloss over who they actually are. And that was time that you spent face to face in the back of a car. It's the time that you spend at the restaurant. It's, all of the other variables are easily stripped out, and you can paint a picture and a false narrative sometimes of who you actually are, as opposed to your core competencies and what you want to accomplish. And so we have been fortunate, I think, in many of the circumstances where we've invested in the last year to have a deep network in the verticals we operate in to be able to ask those types of questions. Now, arguably the best investment I've made out of this fund is one where I wasn't able to do any reference checks, where I didn't have a clear indication of the moral compass of the founders. And they've been phenomenal. And we're going through a very difficult situation right now. And the way in which they have, steered the company through this adversity has been mind-boggling to me. Like, I don't know how they do it. And sometimes you get lucky, but again, it comes down to having spent 20 years trying to hone your craft in something, because there's an art and a science to this. The science is your returns analysis. It's all the typical stuff that goes into a business plan and competition. But the art of it is being able to synthesize down in what is relatively short order and decreasing, given the amount of capital in the ecosystem and the willingness of a lot of venture capitalists to not give a shit about anything other than returns, to figure out how are you going to get to that yes. And that is something I personally struggle with, because that yes or no in a short period of time without having those variables in place can make or break how we are perceived by the market. And I've made mistakes in the past with management teams that have gone through serious issues ethically and morally. And so I hold myself accountable for that, because I was the individual giving them capital to enable this type of behavior. And so it strikes me in a very real way. And it's not something that's getting easier at this moment in time, given shelter in place, given distance, given the influx of capital, given the lack of I think, morality and focus on returns that one can compete in this market in a way that makes you feel good about yourself.
A remarkable answer, and Brian from Refashioned, who, if anyone has supply chain issues, is an extraordinary resource for that and for many other things, said, how I summarize what Kai is saying: everything is due diligence, all the information, and yet haven't talked about at all. And one of the questions that people wanted to know about from our survey is, we haven't talked about the look and feel of your website, your brand, what's on your social media, right? And you're talking from a funding perspective about character, resilience, integrity. How much does the other stuff matter, and how much does that stuff impact a decision of whether to fund a company?
I don't fund companies, but I will say everything that Kai is saying is so real, because that is all a part of like what you are in the places where nobody sees you is really who your brand is. Like that's the stuff, right? You know, so that is the branding. I think that that's even more important than the physical branding, you know, because you know, whatever's in the dark is definitely gonna come out in the light. And we've just seen that time over and time again. So everything that Kai said, like I like, man, like I like feel what you're saying because I think the same way. You know, you really gotta pay attention to people, you know?
One of my favorite Nipsey Hussle lines is, nobody knows who's swimming naked till the tide comes in. And,
Exactly.
you know, it's like, it's hard. It's really, really hard, right? Like due diligence, you know, when you talk about it, like you can do a million you know, here's the 4 people you should call. Thank you. Throw that in the trash. Like, who am I actually going to go out to? It's like, who can I find that knows something about you that you don't want me to know, right? So those are the 4 people I exclude from my diligence calls. You know, like, thank you very much for eliminating the 6 people on LinkedIn that I know have said nice things about you. And so, you know, diligence is, you know, and I find it fascinating, like some of the best people who I've conduct diligence are like former reporters, because like that's their whole job, right? Like your job is to uncover this kind of information that nobody's willing to share. And so you kind of look at it almost like an investigative reporter oftentimes, to be able to scratch the surface of it. And so, you know, you get better at it and you understand, you know, what risks you're willing to take. But I don't know if that answers your question, and I don't even know what I was going to say, what the question was.
So I think there's like a different, like, I feel like so many people, whether it be social media, whether it be your website, which ours is horrible, by the way, we're working on improving it. I feel like, yeah, it's important. We should spend more time on that. That's a different story. You know, for me, Kai, when you said the restaurant thing, that's something we do for our summer associates. If any of, you know, any candidates are on the line, we're blowing the secret, but we make it a point to take them to either lunch or dinner. And for me, it is seeing how they interact with the wait staff during that, how they ask for things, is a big part. And we've, you know, there have been people who had the glossiest resume, et cetera, and were just rude. You know, we've had people come in for interviews and just be rude to our office manager at the front. And so I always, after that person comes in for an interview, go to our office manager and was like, how were they? And because that is, you know, it's like, how do they interact with people who can't really do anything for them, right? Because in front of us, their representative is on, but you want what the actual content is. And we've made hire decisions to hire or not hire based on that. The big thing for me when I was teaching entrepreneurs and, you know, helping them, I think everyone is so focused on the pitch deck. And when the pitch deck gets you in the door, but once you're in the door, you have to have the substance in the pitch deck. And so many times entrepreneurs couldn't even speak to what was there. Like you would dig in, you're like, oh, so it says here, these are your markets. Like, how did you get access to those? Or what percentage, you know, what's the distribution in terms of revenue across those markets? And they couldn't answer those questions. So, you know, a big focus was like, hey, it's not, you know, I think so many accelerators, especially when they came out, it was around like, how do you make yourself look good? And how do you build that flashy deck? But less about like, how do you know your metrics? How do you know your numbers? How do you speak to them? Do you know your customers, et cetera? And that was our focus. I mean, to me, that was so important because it's your company and you should know it in and out. And it's almost a death blow being like, oh, well, I'll talk to our CTO about this. Like, if you don't know how your product works, then I think then I'm not going to invest. Like, if you can't tell me, then, you know, what are we doing here? So it's important, you know, I feel like there is, you know, it's like going on a date. The gloss is what kind of hooks you in, but the conversation is what gets you to stay. I think it's the same thing. It's like the website, the flash, the a deck gets you in, but the, you know, the content and knowing the story is what gets you to stay.
So how much time at early stage do you spend on making the stuff appealing and compelling? And clearly you have to make sure that you can back up what's appealing and compelling, right? A fantastic website and an easy process to order, let's say, a physical product or a service, where the service or physical product then sucks, is a problem that's going to fail. So it's the substance behind it. But how much time do you spend, and at what point in time do you spend? And I know, you know, Florian, you were doing digital marketing 20 years ago. And how should people think about prioritizing that when they have scarce resources and scarce dollars? And B, I know you also cut corners at that stage.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think as the others have said before, I think if you don't get this first impression right, I think it's very hard to jump out of the bucket you've been put into. Yeah. So I think, and that is what actually German founders struggle quite a lot with, because I think the selling yourself and that's not really something that's not very German. Yeah. So and I would, because they always think, especially the technical founders, if I have a great product, people will recognize the substance and it will sell itself. And I always say, but no, that's bullshit. And that's sometimes also as a VC, you get, you know, the criticism, oh, you haven't really dealt with my things in enough depth to really understand the great substance of it. And I said, yes, but if I don't understand it in 30 minutes, really good employees will not get it, and other my fellow investors, you know, who we don't have that many of in the later stage in Germany, yeah, so they also won't understand it, very likely, or I just have a bad day, or I'm plain stupid that day. That can also be the case, yeah. But on average, it's a pretty good indicator, and that's why I always tell people I would spend more time on it than you feel comfortable with, like naturally, as you would normally do. Because I think if you do, it just puts you on a different track, because you convince better investors or better angels or better employees if you really spend that extra effort, especially in the beginning. Yeah, and that's why I would always argue it's definitely something that has to be prioritized. And I to be honest with you, I don't know whether that was really the question, Ed, but I still want to say it, if that's okay. We also, as a fund, spend quite a lot of money on or quite a lot of resources on social media and presenting ourselves. Not so much also to get attention, just or reach. That's also one point. But the other point is, if we authentically tell people who we are, and it's quite easy to see, it's also, you know, a very good self-selection mechanism for entrepreneurs, for LPs, or for other people that either want to interact or don't want to interact with us, who we are. Yeah, and I think if you spend a little bit of time, and I mean, just to give you a really quick background, we call ourselves operational VC. What does that mean? I mean, we basically have an investment team, and we have also an operational team of 90 people supporting our ventures. So huge operational team. Yeah. So, and that's obviously our USP. Yeah. Because we tell people, oh, we're not just somebody giving you money and then Florian hopefully giving you one or two good advices every month, but there's actually people that know what they're doing, you know, that can help you build a data warehouse, or that can help you build a better campaign on Instagram, or whatever it is. Yeah. So people that actually know what they're doing. And obviously we want to show that to the outside world, because we want entrepreneurs that say, oh, that sounds appealing. We want exactly those people to understand, when they send their deck to us, this is what's going to be expected. Yeah. And we also put our values out to the outside world. One of the values is no assholes allowed, ideally inside the company and also the portfolio. I mean, that doesn't always work, but I think it's just important to show to the outside world that's something that's important to us. I don't know what value it is. I think it's number 2 or 3 is no assholes allowed. So, and that's obviously important to us. Yeah. So, and if people basically say, okay, these guys put at least, yes, they want to make money, but they at least put some emphasis also on what kind of human being is in the company and is in the portfolio. That's a good message. And it's not just only for marketing purposes. I think it's also, just a self-select, because I think a lot of mismatches that happen in venture capital or in teams is people just have different expectations when they go into a situation. And I think a good, authentic, and quite active communication can just help, minimizing the number of mismatches, not only in the application process in terms of, or the due diligence process, but also, going forward. And I think that's why I would always, put a little more emphasis on communication than you would naturally do or think it might be a good allocation of resources. We've made pretty good experience with that, to be honest. Yeah.
So we'll do one or two more questions, and then we'll have some questions from the folks who are here. And I just, you talk about the importance of communications. What about press, and what about having a social media strategy? We know Pi doesn't do much on social media. We know Florian does all these podcasts in German language and has done much less in English language. And those are conscious decisions that you make about how and where you want to focus your efforts and your brand. How important are those things, and how much do, if you're starting a company, or if you're, looking for funding or launching a product for your company, how important is social media? How important is trying to get press, and how do you get it?
One of the most interesting strategies that I've used as a founder is, I have been in the gaming ecosystem for a long time, and we read everything there. And if somebody covers in the Wall Street Journal and GamesBeat, it doesn't really matter, something that, a portfolio company or a topic that we have knowledge of, we'll just reach out to the reporter directly, right? They're easy to find. And we'll just say, oh, this is really interesting. We love that article. Here's some interesting perspective. Here's some writing that we posted. And then they come back to you as thought leaders. They want to quote you in articles. They're looking at you as a resource. And so a lot of this, outwardly focused kind of, shouting from the mountaintops, there are incredibly effective methods and techniques to get to the influencers and decision makers who will be able to promote your voice in an organic manner. And then oftentimes that is actually more effective than the self-promotion, right? Not saying that having a great website or Twitter feed or whatever isn't there. Like, again, the most successful interaction I possibly can have with a founder is somebody who I pass on, and months later, they make an introduction to their friend's company because they had a positive experience working with our fund. That's the best intro I can possibly get. They passed on my deal, and I still want you to go and talk to them. And that means I was respectful in a meeting, that I gave them good feedback and advice. I may have made an introduction for a commercial arrangement, or I sent them to another VC that was appropriate for the stage or size. And that's value add to them. And I may have been short, and it may not have led to money directly for them, but I see that time and time again. And when you build that organic network of trust and respect amongst founders, then the deal flow that you're getting, it's before anybody has led the round, and there's only a 2.5% slug left, and I have to make a decision in 72 hours, right? And you're in a position to lead. And so, I never discourage people from having a great social media campaign, a beautiful website, doing what they need to promote their own brand. But there are alternative methods that people oftentimes don't explore that can be just as effective and build a brand without self-promotion. And so I think there's a balance, again, and it speaks to the authenticity that you want to have somebody else promoting you, or sharing comments and stories about you, as well as talking about yourself, right? And my partners both have more than 10,000 Twitter followers. So despite the fact that like I have almost none, like they do a great job, right? And Vasu is incredibly outspoken on the politics side. And if anybody wants a really entertaining read about sports and politics, Vasu is great, but like for me, that's not my outlet, right? And everybody needs to find what drives that brand authenticity for them within their vertical and their stage. And some people are generalists, so you need to be out and about quite a bit. If I focus on one vertical and one stage, I'm pretty much good to go, right? And that's the balance that people need to seek and find amongst their own brand, from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I think the phrase like how can I be helpful like has just become like a meme for VCs. But I, you know, when I think about our comms team who is amazing, Kim Bardakian, who's now no longer part of, she's, you know, got promoted to partnerships. I think her whole ethos for forming relationships with reporters, with media, etc., was like, let's be helpful. So like if they're writing a story and just need like demographic numbers or, you know, fundraising numbers, we may not get a mention at all in that article, but she serves as a resource. And it's 100% about forming those relationships. And so because she spent the time to be helpful to them, you know, when they are writing a story, they'll reach out to us and say like, hey, do you have a founder in, you know, focusing on environmental justice, et cetera? I would love to feature them there. And so, you know, recognizing again, it's just, you know, not just reaching out when you want them to cover one of your portfolio companies, but making sure there's kind of, you're helpful before, you know, you need something from them. The other thing too, is like Cliff Worley, who's, you know, part of our portfolio services team and just has done an amazing job for our portfolio companies, helping them grow their brands. His big thing is like, you know, not just posting things every day, but you really want, again, to post information that is helpful for your audience, right? So we have, you know, we have companies who are focused on maternal health. They're posting resources like how do you maximize your maternity leave benefits? You know, they're posting like, you know, how do you increase your milk production? And it is things that folks will consume and they will continue to go back to it, not just because it's, you know, it's noise, but it's something that they have found useful in their life. And it's not just, you know, branding all the time. And I think that that is how you build your brand too. There's a brand association with, you know, this brand is associated with like really caring about moms, you know, really being helpful there. For Twitter, for me, there is, you know, I post whatever comes to my mind. I use it as an outlet to have fun. You know, there's no business case there. It's very much like top of mind, but then that's who I am, and I don't know, that is my brand. So I see a lot of people who are a lot more strategic, but you know, I think it's a great opportunity to just shout out people who I think are doing a good job, and a way for folks to gain access to. I mean, folks DM me who you know, on your point, Kai, it's like I got an investment from a company through Twitter, which I thought was awesome. And I used it as a means of justifying all the hours that I feel I may have wasted on Twitter. I was like, no, we got a deal. And so, and just actually connect it with the potential LP because I posted about Nollywood, which has nothing at all to do with my job. But I just love Nollywood, and that's what what I do. So I think, you know, especially in COVID times where you can't go nowhere, Twitter is a great way of connecting with folks. And Ed, I think we met on Twitter. I don't know, or connected in some way related to Twitter. So I love those outlets as just a connection point.
Yeah, they can deepen or destroy relationships. So I'm going to ask for one or two questions. I want to thank a couple of people in addition to our wonderful and insightful panelists. I want to thank Katie Davey and Brittany Harlos and Karen Ernst and Carrie Fisk and Angela, who is my access to the world and organizes everything for me. Betty King as well. Research, and I know B was giving me a hard time about various articles, but imagine being an attorney in the tech group at Lowenstein and being told you're going to be researching bacterial vaginosis. So some of the research for today was done by our colleagues, Megan Williams, Elena Urbans, Sammy Ackley, and Shomi Ulis, and I really appreciate that and appreciate everyone joining Venture Crush. Let's do a couple of questions from those who are here if you have them. We're going to try to see if you can just unmute yourself and ask. and see if that works. So fire away, and if not, we'll do one or two more and then sign off. Anyone?
Hi, thanks so much for putting this on, Ed. This is Courtney Williamson, CEO of Abilla Life, med tech company. I have a question. I was actually part of a Venture Crush cohort a few years ago. A question about personal stories and interweaving that into the brand of the company. My personal story is what led me to launch my company. I have absolutely no traditional background in what I'm doing, but it was my story that led me to do this. I've heard the question is how to incorporate that into the story and the branding. I've heard it both ways. Some people said it made it seem a little non-profity. Like I've heard people tell me that, but then so then I shied away from bringing that in. Then I've also heard people say, no, like that's very important. You need to put that up front. So just questions about that. And yes, Ed, I am Dr. Williamson.
I was going to say, and before anyone answers, the fact that you just said, I don't have the traditional trappings of the qualifications here. You have a PhD from Carnegie Mellon, doctor.
Yeah. I do.
Feel free to lead with that. Okay. All right. Smart people now answer.
B, you should go ahead.
I think that your story is the thing that actually connects you to everything. Because one thing that all humans have in common is that everybody's got a story. I remember one time I went and with our PR company, they had hired what's the person's, Kai, who's the person that you go to that like media training? It was like media training, right? And I tell her my story and, and I am who I am. Like, I'm not gonna like try to change my voice or try to be upbeat if I'm not like if I don't feel like doing that shit, this is what you're getting, right? And she went on to tell me that I shouldn't tell people my story because it kind of sounded, what'd she say? It sounded mystical, and and she told me that she basically like kind of in a minute, I've only known her for 10 minutes, tells me what I should say instead of saying my story, right? For me, what that told me immediately is that she was not the media trainer that I needed to work with, because she was only interested in seeing me as just the number, as just a person, that she didn't see me as a human, right? Because if she saw me as a human, she would know. If she saw me as a human, she would understand and know that I have to be authentic to my story. I am just a terrible bullshitter, right? I hate small talk. I hate I just hate when I can't come in here and just be who I am, do what I want to do and go, right? Like I don't want to waste anybody's time. So in that moment, she lost a customer, right? I think that when you tell people your story, they can see themselves in you, and they can see that whether you have all of the, all of the experience in the world, or whether I don't remember what the name of the college is that you graduated from as a medical doctor, and you're a Black woman, and you're all these things, that can happen on that side too. You can actually do something that you don't have any experience in and that you've never done. But I think that has to be represented in your story. Otherwise, how will you be able to inspire others, to potentially do what you're doing? And then the question begs, do you really want to do that, right? So I can't tell you what to do or not to do, but I do absolutely understand the power of your story and what that does to get you to connect to humans in a way that you may not have been able to connect because they might have been intimidated by you. And that is a brick wall that comes up. But when you can meet somebody as a human, the bricks start to come down, you know? So I just think that being authentic to who you are is important, and telling your story precisely how it happened is even more important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add on to that and just say, telling your story as a founder, there's the story should remain authentic and true to the investors you're pitching, as well as the audience you're serving, right? Like that's what makes people connect to your brand. Like I made an investment in the company Lust Brands. Sahar's based in Toronto. She makes a shampoo, conditioner, all in one for curly, wavy, kinky hair women. She's the one in the YouTube videos. Like she is doing the work. Like this is the problem I had with my hair. This is how I am trying to solve it. And that's a sale. Like she is out there grassroots selling her brand. And when she had gotten to $1 million in ARR before she came to raise any capital. And when she came to tell me the story, I'm like, oh, this is, the cabinet in my household, right? Like I can tell you about everything that's going on with this product, right? Like I know exactly, like curly pudding, like you want to talk to me about Miss Jessie's, like I'll go through everything. I have no hair, but I can tell you every single curly hair product that's in the market. And the story was what made me understand, because that's the conversation I'm sitting there having, when my wife is around 4 friends talking about, well, I don't know about the water pressure or the humidity, or is it the stay in, or is it the washout? And I'm like, I won the deal because of that, right? And so you can't just talk about the unit economics, and that all matters, it's important, but the story is what makes people connect.
And these are great summations of how you should think about branding, right? Brian's comment, people do business with other people. Robin's, the story is the source of the empathy. These are great. Let's do one, we'll let everyone go. I realize it's getting late. Anyone have one last question they want to pose?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Colin Walter here from 3852 AI. My question is really about, when is it a good idea to introduce the science? We're an artificial intelligence company that focuses on creating novel mechanisms of action through developmental drugs. And we tend to get into the science pretty quickly. And I've noticed in some situations that a lot of VCs kind of get overpowered by all of the scientific talk when I have PhDs and chief technologists getting into how they normally communicate at maybe a university. They kind of get lost and then start kind of hypothesizing about what it means to them. How do I get that? Is that something I should maybe push back and go more towards the story of how we created the company and the different effects that these products can have?
Maybe I can.
By the way, in the chat, Florian.
Yeah, well, maybe I can comment on that. I think first of all, you have to sell the story of what you actually solve as a problem and why that matters. Because I think if you lose people too early, and I think there's a risk of doing that if you have the science guys out too early or too quickly, then it won't help anybody. So I think first understanding what the use case is, why it solves a great problem, why you're good at it, why you're so passionate about it, that helps. And then especially in AI, that's at least my experience, because a lot of companies claim they're AI. And then you look in the room and basically say, okay, who of you guys is doing AI? Because it's definitely not on the Zoom conference. Yeah. So then it definitely helps to have like, a second session or a separate session with the guys that are actually doing it. And then it's okay if I only get half of what they're doing, as long as I have the feeling that these guys are genuine. But I think that's at least my kind of how I would approach it. That's kind of a second step. Convince me of, why it matters first. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then convince me of the substance that you are actually able to do this by showing me the people who are a lot smarter than I am, and who are genuine about what they do. That's at least what my answer would be.
And
awesome.
And another thing that you can do is you can talk to the story, and you can give a very real life example of how that AI works in a very personable, like, I don't know what it is that you do, if it's, but I think if you can have a very simple elementary case study of what your AI does, right? That is literally like the appetizer to the conversation that Florian was just talking about, to serve up kind of a second conversation so that you can actually see it in real life. But I think if you have a way to present the AI in a way that is extremely simple to wrap your mind around, which has to be able to happen, right? And then use that as the teaser to say, we can do another meeting, like Florian said, where we can really go through this so you can get it. But if you just give them a little spoonful, that'll entice them, because if you go too far into something somebody don't understand, they're gone already. It's really hard to give them that.
Yeah.
Tom,
I think for us,
Sorry.
it's also the challenge that we have a leader in the field with our chief technologist, Norman Packard. He's written books, he's developed this technology before. So he's really passionate about it. And then he can be a little bit long-winded in certain aspects of it because of his passion. And even our name is really a derivative of our story, because we basically create drugs and we're looking primarily at cancer. And it comes out of our relationship with a friend of ours who had cancer at 38 years old, and still at 52 is still battling it. So
that's
really
the story. I mean, you also have to understand who's in the room.
Exactly.
Because if you have someone who is an MD, PhD, who's been studying oncology, that is a different conversation than if I am in the room with my sociology and anthropology undergraduate degree, but with, multiple family members who died of cancer. And that's, when I invested in Flatiron Health, I did not invest in Flatiron Health because I understood oncology. I understood that cancer killed people and is a really big problem. And I understand founders a little bit. So
Tom said it really great. I mean, he's like, you have to make sure you're talking to the right investors too. I mean, I think that is the thing. If Theranos, I think, taught the world anything, is there was a lot of investors investing in like diagnostics who had no idea what they were doing, or didn't have anyone telling them that. So I feel like the people who invest, I'm sure like Ed has a whole cadre of like people who could, dig in deep on the science, even though, it's something he may not know personally. So the story is going to hook. For me, it's like, I want to know the why, to Dr. Williams' point. Like if someone's just building it because they see it as a market to make a lot of money, I'm not going to do it. The why is what's going to get me, but we invest in evidence-based products. And so the science is what's going to get my money. Right. So
I like that.
You just have to find the right person.
Well, thank you all for finding your way to Venture Crush and for discussing brand and branding and all sorts of other things with us today. It's been great to get to spend time with all of you. I really appreciate it. Kai, Lily, Florian, B. It's really nice to visit with each and all of you. Look forward to following up. Thank you everyone, and thank you to the Lowenstein team that puts this together.